In today's lecture, we'll discuss about the cloud services layer. So if you remember from the Snowflake architecture, there are three main layers in Snowflake. The first is the cloud services layer. The second is the compute layer, where we have the virtual warehouses. And the final is the actual data storage. So these are the three important layers in the Snowflake architecture. The first layer of this is the cloud services layer, and that is something which makes Snowflake much unique as compared to some of the other traditional warehouses, or some even as compared to some of the other cloud warehouses. So this cloud services layer is supposed to be the brain of Snowflake. It does a lot of activities, okay, and we'll look at all of them today in today's lecture. So this cloud services layer is basically responsible for coordination of activities across Snowflake. Okay, it has multiple services. It's a whole collection of services. It is responsible for the overall authentication, infrastructure management, metadata management, query passing and optimization, as well as access control. All of these are done through cloud services layer. And this layer is common. Okay, it is common across multiple Snowflake accounts. So if we have a Snowflake account, it's not that you get a dedicated cloud services layer. And that is why you are also not directly charged for the compute of this. So the warehouses that you create, okay, the user warehouses that you create, the virtual warehouses are not used for the operations related to cloud services layer. It is internal to Snowflake. So what are services it suppose? The very first, authentication. Whenever a user comes in and the authentication happens, okay, to prove that he is what he is claiming to be, that is done through this cloud services layer. That is authentication. A second, what is access control? To get the right privileges to the roles, and based on what privileges a certain role has, he can access or cannot access a certain object, okay, or can see certain data. That is all access control, again done by cloud services layer. uh, Third is, let's talk about the query parsing, right? Again, this is very important. Whenever you fire a query, it goes through cloud services layer. So it is responsible for the query parsing, the query compilation, um, query planning, query optimization, right? Everything related to that, it is done by the cloud services layer. Just the actual query execution, okay, the actual query execution is what happens on the compute layer, which is the virtual warehouse. But apart from that, the initial query passing optimization is all done to the cloud services layer. uh, the next service is the metadata management, as we saw in one of our lectures, right? When you are trying to do a select count star, you directly get the result. There is no compute resource used for these things, and this happens through cloud services layer. So in as part of the metadata management, right, it is storing all this metadata as well, like how many records are present, what is the size of the table. So all these things are also coming from the cloud services layer. And finally, the overall infrastructure management, right? So all this thing is done by the cloud services layer. So those who come from the Hadoop world, or in fact in Redshift also, right, there is a leader node, or in Hadoop there is a master node. So in Snowflake, right, there is no such leader node or a master node, right? So look at this as an alternative to that, but it is not exactly a leader node or a the Hadoop master node or a primary node, because there, right, it becomes the single point of failure. You need to have HA for that. But here you don't really have to worry about it. This is always there. You don't really have to provision. You don't have to worry about it. So this is your first layer, right? Whenever a query hits in, it will come to this layer, and then it will go to the compute layer to fetch, to do the processing, and then to the storage to get the data. Again, based on whether the data is cached, it will come from the caching. If it is in storage, it will come from storage, right? But this is the very first layer, which coordinates all these things. Okay. And as I said right earlier, this is shared across the accounts, right? But if you go for a VPS edition, right, which is I believe the private Snowflake edition, right? Only for that you will get a dedicated cloud services layer, but for rest all, it is the shared across different Snowflake accounts. But yeah, it has advantages and disadvantages of that. If you go for an VPS where it is not shared, a lot of things won't be shared. The data sharing won't be allowed across the accounts. And that is mainly meant from who wants some, really a really private account only dedicated from them. But for all the other editions, you have this cloud services layer which is shared across, and this is the layer which I think makes it really unique. You don't have to worry about the single point of failure or HA or any such management of this layer.